The Mayor of London Sadiq Khan in the studio with me, although we are scrupulously social distanced. If you'd like to put a question to him, the number you need is 0345 6060 973. And you really can ask him whatever you want. Mr. Mayor, good to see you.
Good to see you. It really is. I've not seen you for months now, but it's
been ages.
Can I just say, as much of as a displeasure that may be, you've got an air-conditioned studio, so it really is nice to see you, James.
For once, it's remarkably chilled. We should begin, of course, I think, before we throw the phone lines open, 0345 6060 973, with this A-level debacle. And, the people who would ordinarily queue up to say something like a couple of lefties having a pop at the government should have listened to the end of Nick Ferrari's show. And indeed, the front page of the Daily Mail today, that well-known communist manifesto, you dunces, exam grades in chaos, teachers in despair, appeals set for meltdown. And this, of course, is the Education Secretary whose word we are supposed to trust when it comes to schools reopening in September.
I must start by congratulating the young people who've worked so hard over the last 2 years and who will be getting their marks today, and their teachers and their families who've worked incredibly hard. Congratulations if you've got the grades you expected and needed and wanted. But I really feel for those children, their teachers and their families who have been affected by this diabolical, shambolic example of this government's incompetence. I mean, basically, A-levels, the results today didn't just spring up on us. It wasn't like suddenly it was decided that the results would be announced today. We've known, every year this happens.
Not 1951.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. Every year this happens. And from March, it was clear that schools couldn't carry on as normal. And from March, it was clear there'd have to be some other way of assessing children's achievements. And yet we have, the day before the results come out, the Education Secretary announcing a massive U-turn. We saw what happened in Scotland last week, and I really feel for those children who've had their grades downgraded because of an algorithm. None of us know about this algorithm. None of us have seen how it works. But the estimates the teachers gave have been downgraded, and some children I've been hearing this morning.
There's some of these stories that Nick was hearing were absolutely harrowing.
And all I'd say if you're somebody listening or a parent of somebody whose grades aren't what you expected, don't despair. Because there are a number of things. Firstly, I welcome the U-turn from the government, as late as it is, in relation to the schools being able to swap your mock results and also your ability to bill or to reset again. But honestly, it's not the end of the world. And so it's really important that we give these young people hope. And I think one of the things I say to the government is one of the reasons why we are is because of your arrogance in not allowing yourselves to be tested. This is one example. Test, trace, isolate, another example. The medical experience in care homes, another example. Personal protective equipment, another example. And by the way, if Cobra was sitting, James, we could have discussed some of these issues around the Cobra table.
Still not.
And kicked the tyres and come up with a better resolution. And it's because this group thinking, where Boris Johnson and his cabinet think they know best, we've got these fiascos day after day.
Is it beyond the wit of man to simply say that the children should have kept the grade that was predicted? I know they talk about inflation, and Gavin Williamson worries that people from this generation may end up in jobs that they're not qualified to do. Gavin Williamson. But what would the downside be if they just said, right, we've fluffed this up?
No.
Keep the grade that you were predicted.
The smart solution would have been to say, teachers, you know your children the best. This is an exceptional year. This is an exceptional year because of COVID. It's been an exceptional year for many people. Your estimates is what we're going to go by because we understand the exceptional nature of this year. And it's the arrogance of saying teachers don't know best. And actually what we'll do instead is design an algorithm 150 pages long, I'm told. Yes. Keep it a secret, and that will determine these children's future rather than qualified, experienced teachers who know their children the best. And it's the arrogance.
But is it worth leaving the government space to U-turn, though? To leaving them space, rather than going in with all guns blazing, leave them the space to say, actually, you're right. You can keep the grade, your official grade.
Oh no, but the U-turn isn't to allow teachers to give the assessment as happened in Scotland.
Yes.
What this government is saying in England,
I know what they're saying now, but rather than going in with all guns blazing this morning, would it be helpful, perhaps? I mean, it's just a theoretical question to leave them space to say we've messed this up. Go back to the grade that you were predicted.
Look, all of us make mistakes.
Sure.
And what Gavin Williamson and the government should do is say, you know what, we got it wrong. This algorithm was a silly idea. Actually. Teachers do know best. What we'll do instead of the appeal or resitting the exam or using the mocks is we'll go back to the teacher's assessment, which is what Scotland did. To give credit to Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon and John Sweeney messed it up. They put their hands up, mea culpa, and have allowed the children to be awarded the teacher's assessment.
I'm going to introduce the callers because I don't want to hand you the pieces of paper that I normally hand you during the social distancing era. So Aria is first in Isleworth, but speak directly to the Mayor of London, Aria.
Hello, so I'm an A-level student from London and I just got my A-level results today and they are not as expected at all. And I wanted to know if you're going to put pressure on the government to call for us to get our predicted grades like Scotland have.
All right, firstly, look, I'm really sorry you didn't get the grades you deserved and expected. And yes, I will. You've heard what I said to James in relation to the shambolic way the government's handled this. I don't think you should be caught in the crossfire, nor you should be used as a pawn. So one of the things I'll be saying to the government, and you've heard me say it a few moments ago with James, is what the government should be doing is saying, you know what, we will instead replace the grade students have received from the algorithm if it's been downgraded. We'll replace it instead with the teacher's assessment. Not even the mock exam results. Some schools didn't do mocks. Not wait until October to do an appeal, which means you miss out a year of university. But will allow you to have the grades your teachers assessed, because it's so important for children who are at crossroads going to universities, deciding their career, and you shouldn't be a victim of the government's incompetent handling of this COVID crisis. And by the way, Ari, it's no consolation to you. One of the things I've been saying in the past is the government's got it wrong dealing with the health consequences of COVID, the economic consequences of COVID, and now we know the education consequences of COVID. And so, Ari, I'm on your side, and I'll be lobbying the government, and not just publicly through the medium of LBC, but also writing to Gavin Williamson as well, today to make sure that he does the right thing. By the way, Scotland have done the right thing, Aria. What they did in Scotland was the government realised they'd got it wrong. They'd realised that was the unfair thing to do. And what Scotland did was they said they will give young people the grade that the teachers had assessed that they should receive, rather than appealing or going through a cumbersome resit or other things.
Aria, can I ask what happened? Can I ask what you were expecting?
So I was predicted an A-star AA in maths by the maths and physics, and I was going to do mechanical engineering.
Yes.
And then in the A-levels, I got an ABC, which were equivalent to my mock grades.
Right. And that won't be good enough to get you onto the course that you want to get onto?
No, it's too low, and the universities aren't as flexible as they seem to be. So
have you been in touch? You have already been in touch? Yes,
I've already called them, and they still want A-star AA, which is I can't get it at the moment.
And can I just say, Ari, the reason why I've got huge sympathy with you is because actually it's quite common for young people to do better in the exam than their mock. And so often what happens is you do your mocks and it gives you an idea where you are. And then between the mocks and your exams proper, you work your socks off and you get much better results. And that's why a teacher's assessment is far fairer than using the mock exams that the government is suggesting. And by the way, as I said, listen, just in case you didn't know, the Scottish government is not from my party, but credit where it's due. They messed up and they've done a U-turn, as I'm suggesting the government should do with you, because a teacher's assessment is far more accurate of your grades, as they should have been, rather than the mock exams.
Stay safe, Aria.
I totally agree with that.
Hang in there. I mean, nobody knows anything in the current context of British politics, but I wouldn't be staggered if there was some shift, if there was some change in the coming days, because the scale of the disgust and the scale of the suffering for students like you is so unprecedented. But take care, and you've still done well.
You've done really well.
Yeah,
I mean, Ari, the other thing is, listen, honestly, it's not just me just saying this to patronise you, but you've got great results. A-levels isn't the be-all and end-all, but actually I'll be lobbying the government to do the right thing, and I'm sure your parents, others will as well, including your teachers.
She wants to get onto that course, doesn't she? That's the thing. Yeah. 13 minutes after 10. Phone lines are open. You're free to ask the Mayor of London anything you like in this, frankly, remarkable period in British history. Pauline is in Watford. Pauline, you're through to the Mayor.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning,
Mr.
Pauline.
Mayor. I would like to know what can be done about what I think is apparent institutional racism in the Metropolitan Police, especially with the Dawn Butler incident, and the very interesting juxtaposition of deciding to deactivate the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, which was highly suspected to be due to institutional racism that caused that botched pursuit of the criminals who killed him. And very interestingly, that was something that we have paid money for rightly as taxpayers, and we continue to pay for the McCann case where a crime happened in a foreign country. And that hasn't been deactivated as far as I know, and it's been going on for years. I could go on and on and on about very interesting links, but I'm interested to know if there's anything that can be done.
Well, let me just bring people up to date with Dawn Butler's story. Stopped by the police and very unhappy about it. But the police today, a deputy commissioner has stated that there was no malfeasance or misbehaviour on the part of their officers, and there is a frustration among officers that their footage doesn't get released. The body cams are quite a big breakthrough potentially in the context of stop and search, disproportionate stop and search, but the stopping of the car, the Metropolitan Police are confident, was not racially motivated because the windows of the car were tinted.
Well, let me deal, James, with the wider point Pauline makes before the specifics. So, Pauline, I think one of the things that we should be grateful for the Black Lives Matter movement for is it's reminded us that we can't be complacent when it comes to the racism, the discrimination and the inequality faced by black people, not just in Minnesota, Minneapolis, but around the world, including London. And that includes the way public institutions treat people because of their colour, not just the police service, but the CPS, the courts, schools, politicians, the NHS, big employers, and so forth. And when you look at what Sir William Macpherson said, helped by his advisors, after the Stephen Lawrence public inquiry, he said that not only was there institutional racism in the police service, but actually all bodies should look at themselves and see whether there is unwitting prejudice, racial stereotyping, thoughtlessness that leads to the sort of level of service being provided being less good to people of colour or their ethnicity or other issues as well. And I think actually we should all be mindful of that, whatever job we do. And I think there are examples of disproportionality when it comes to the police service. There are huge levels of distrust with black community and the police, and actually it's in all of our interest to address that. When it comes to the Dawn Butler case, the reason why Dawn is so concerned, it's not because she's an MP or she's pompous, she's far from it, and I declare an interest, she's one of my best friends. Her concern is that if that's her experience as a reasonably successful black woman driving a nice car or being driven in a nice car, what is the experience of ordinary Londoners? And that's why she raised the issue. It wasn't, to make a party political point. It was to say, look, there is an issue here and the police need to consider how they police. Are they intentionally or unintentionally racially profiling? Are they using the same policing tactics with other Londoners as they are with her? And she met with the Commissioner yesterday to discuss some of her concerns. But Pauline, I'm live to the concerns you've raised, the so-called double standards. The Commissioner and the police know my concerns. And that's not, by the way, to detract from the brilliance of our police service. They are brilliant. They work their socks off. They risk their lives every day. But there are concerns that must be addressed.
The tinted windows seem to be significant, certainly in the
let me deal with
Sir
that.
Steve House's statement today.
Yeah, so my understanding is that tinted windows aren't unlawful. It is not against the law to have windows tinted.
No.
In fact, most cars, modern cars, now have tinted windows. And so the concern is the reason why the police stop a car because your windows are tinted, or because it's a nice car, or because the driver's black? I think
it's more the case that they couldn't possibly have stopped the car because of the ethnicity of the people in the car, because the windows were tinted.
Yeah, that's the point of the Deputy Commissioner raising it. The point I'm making is that's
a solid point, isn't it?
That's what Steve House is saying is hold on a sec. The allegation is we stopped the car because the driver was black or the passenger was black. It ain't the case because the windows are tinted. I think the point that Dawn was making and others were, it's a nice car, it's tinted windows, that's why we were stopped, that's why we were told we were stopped. And that's why there needs to be clarity, because people like Pauline, there are other people across London, across the country, who, as a consequence of examples like this, and by the way, the Dawn Butler case isn't the only case where people have been concerned. We know the Bianca Williams case, we know other cases as well. The 12-year-old boy, where armed officers went into his home. There are a number of examples that cause concern. Steve House's concern as Deputy Commissioner is often we as the public see a snippet of what's happened because of people recording on the phone. And often that snippet isn't the complete story. And what the Deputy Commissioner's concern is, as indeed the concern of officers, is, hold on a sec, there's two sides to the story.
Do you share that concern?
Oh, yeah. I always think you should give people the benefit of the doubt and see the full story. That being said, it's thanks to things being recorded. We know what happened to George Floyd. It's because Rodney King being beaten up 20-odd years ago, or more than that, 30, 40 years ago, we saw what happened to Rodney King. So the point Steve is making, the Deputy Commissioner is making, is you need to understand the full context of what happened before, during and after, rather than a 20 or 30-second clip. And he makes a very, very good point.
There is this so-called culture war underway, which is not new. It's a new name for a very, very, very old war. But it probably would be helpful to at least acknowledge the possibility that the Metropolitan Police may still have deep problems with institutional racism, as identified Macpherson, but that Dawn Butler's experience, as filmed and as understood, isn't actually evidence for the prosecution.
Well, I think
I'm saying that everything doesn't have to be 100%
black and white. No,
yes,
I accept that. Literally. I think the point with Dawn and with other black people is it's the drip, 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 drip thing. So an individual incident by itself may not appear to be serious and may indeed appear to be trivial, but when you've been at the receiving end of this on a regular basis, as indeed have your loved ones who are the same colour skin, it sometimes feels like it is unfair, and it feels like you're being picked on because of the colour of your skin, and there is lots of evidence mounting up. On the other hand, that individual police officers who stopped the car with Dawn and other examples, they themselves, I'm sure, acting lawfully with bona fides, with the best of intentions, but it's sometimes the way policies are implemented, as we saw with Macpherson, that can lead to structural racism or institutional racism. And by the way, this is not just a police issue. I think to put this all at the door of the police is unfair. It's an issue in society generally. I remember acting in a case, Pauline, where it was held by after a public inquiry that the NHS was institutionally racist because the way they treated black men in mental health institutions. And, we've had examples of the BBC, in the media, in politics of racism. So I think, we've got to be cognizant that I think in the UK in 2020, in London, the most progressive city in 2020, there are examples of racism and they need to be addressed.
I think the law is that you're not allowed to tint the front windows, the front drivers and passenger side windows and the windscreen. I thought we'd been clear on that, but a lot of people are contacting me to clarify that point. So I'm glad we've done that. Let's go to Tony in Woodford next. Tony, you're through to the Mayor.
Good morning, Sadiq.
Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. I was going to ask you about the issue of cleaners on London Underground. They don't get free travel to and from work. And this issue is going on long before coronavirus. And it's an issue that the unions have raised. I wonder why they don't get free travel.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for your question. So you're right. So the cleaners are not employed by TfL or London Underground. They're employed by a private company. Since I've become mayor, what we've done is make sure that the cleaners get free travel during the course of their work. So if they're going from station A to station B or bus garage X to bus garage Y, they get free travel for that. They also, by the way, at the start of COVID, I made sure that all the cleaners who were self-isolating or off because of COVID got their full statutory sick pay from day one, and it was averaged out according to what their salary was as well to make sure it was enhanced. But the contract that we have with the cleaning company, we haven't extended to include cleaners going from home to place of work. And there's a variety of reasons for that. We employ lots of contractors, and we're not going to give all our contractors the free travel from home to work and work back to home. What we are going to do is continue to do what I've introduced, which is giving them free travel during the course of their employment when they're working through the contractor for a TfL or the Underground.
Yeah, I know the RMT has raised it as an issue, so I was just sort of raising it because I know that they are campaigning.
Yeah, no, the RMT do a great job, Tony, in raising a number of issues to do with the cleaners because obviously, because they're employed by a contractor, not by us, sometimes I'm not aware of things and I need to be aware. So RMT, because of their good campaigning, let me know, for example, there have been examples where some cleaners weren't getting the minimum wage, forget the living wage, And they've also let me know where, for example, the issues are with cleaners having to pay for their travel between stations, and it's because of RMT's good lobbying, what good trade unions do. It came to our attention and we made these improvements. The RMT, to be fair, are also lobbying for us to take back in-house this cleaning company. I can't do that yet because there's a contract. What I've agreed to do is when the cleaning contract comes to an end, Tony, to consider whether we should either give the contract out again or take them back in-house. But I'll do that when the contract comes to an end rather than buying the contract out.
23 minutes after 10. Thank you, Tony. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is with me in the studio, socially distanced, of course. If there's a question you would like to put to him, or perhaps even pick him up on something that he's already said, 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Sheridan is in Dagenham. Sheridan, you're through to the Mayor.
Hi, both of you. I just wanted to ask you, Sadiq, is it not possible to get some sort of security or conductor person to enforce mask wearing, or we can double charge them since they use their contactless cards or their Oyster cards, so we have their details? Or can we force people that are not wearing masks upstairs and put a plastic sheet over the stairs so their air is not mixing with those of us that do want to be safe, follow the rules, and we care for everybody's lives around us? Can we do something to put like an apartheid between mask wearers and non-mask wearers?
I think we've got enough tension in town without bringing apartheid into things.
I think Sheridan meant segregation, keeping us safe. Look, Sheridan, you're right to raise this issue. It's a really important issue. Let me give you some numbers to reassure you, Sheridan. So the British Transport Police and TfL enforcement officers have been stopping people getting on buses or asking them to leave, including the underground, if they're not wearing a face mask and not got a good reason. So far, the BTP, British Transport Police, and our enforcement officers have spoken to more than 60,000 commuters. And of those they've spoken to, more than 4,000 were asked to were refused entry onto the underground or buses. More than 1,000 were asked to leave a bus or the underground, and more than 300, in fact 303 the last time I checked, fixed penalty notices have been issued. If a bus driver or a member of staff sees somebody not wearing a face covering and they have a conversation with them and they've not got a good reason not to wear them, they contact the enforcement officers or BTP to take action. And just to reassure you, Sheridan, I'm not sure your experience I'd be keen to hear from you in a second, your experience on the bus. The numbers we have, and I was on the tube this morning, and everyone I saw was wearing a face mask on the tube this morning, are 90% of people are wearing face masks. 5% have got a good reason not to wear them for a medical reason or, respiratory issues or whatever. It's 5% haven't got a good reason not to wear a face mask and are not wearing one, and we've got to take action against those, and we are trying to enforce more against that 5%.
How?
By continuing to have more enforcement. So
what happens if it's me? What can be done to me? Because in Spain it's €100 on the spot.
Yeah, it's a similar fine here.
Okay.
But what happens in real time is you get on a bus, refuse to wear a face covering, the bus driver radios ahead to the control room, and then a BTP officer or an enforcement officer gets on the bus later on down the line, and the fixed penalty notice that I talked about, there's been 303 on transport. That leads to a fine. If you pay within 14 days, it's 50 quid. If you pay after 14 days, £100. It can go up to thousands of pounds if you refuse to pay or are a persistent offender.
I mean, I sense you're generally quite pleased with the take-up rate. Sheridan is having having a slightly different experience. I presume you
want to hear Sheridan from you.
What are you seeing? What's happening on your bus?
Sadiq, I'm really sorry, but that's really not true. I think if you really believe that, we should start tagging you on Instagram or Twitter when experiences on the bus, because I know for a fact that the bus driver just playing the recording of wearing a mask and the stickers on the windows is really not doing it. I actually wanted to tip a bus driver the other day who actually stopped the bus personally told somebody, if you're not wearing a mask, go upstairs. If you are wearing,
so you want the bus drivers to do more?
No, I don't think it's fair that they have to.
No.
But what I mean is, I really love that this bus driver cared enough to go over and above to protect those of us who don't want to die. Himself included. I can't believe some bus drivers are not.
But what are you, Sheridan? So I don't want to. What are you cross about, if you don't mind me asking, in the context of the mayor's response?
Because if he really believes that only 300 people that have been fined are the ones that have broken the rules, go on a night bus.
So that's what I was trying to ask you. I said, give me an estimate of the numbers that you're witnessing.
I would say 15 people on my bus journey home last night did not have it on.
That's half.
I mean, I've got videos of it. I've got an Instagram dedicated to taking pictures of people that I see not wearing masks. I really can't believe how much the rules are being broken.
Are these tallies with what I'm hearing anecdotally as well? Who's doing the counting?
Fine. So, TfL in the Underground and BTB. So Sheridan, look, do tag me. So when people tweet me these sort of pictures, I send them on to TfL and they follow it up and they do personally tweet individuals. So Sheridan, if you don't mind, rather than using Insta because it's quicker if you just tweet me or you can Insta me, it doesn't matter. I'll make sure TfL look it up. If you before you hang up, speak to James O'Brien's team to let me know the buses you use, because we'll make sure we have more enforcement in East London if it is the case in Dagenham. Just to give you an idea, James, the numbers we have are accurate figures from, we have a weekly tally. And so when I refer to the 60,000 plus conversations, not every conversation leads to a fixed penalty notice, because sometimes people are persuaded to do the right thing. If they don't, they're asked to leave or refuse to enter. If that doesn't work, they're given a fixed penalty notice. But Sheridan, the numbers I have of a 90% compliance.
A lot of scepticism coming in, Sadiq Khan, on
no, that's
these
fine.
numbers.
No,
a lot of scepticism. Let me just read you a few. I know the plural of anecdote is...
Let us know what buses they are. We'll take action.
Okay, utter rubbish. Sadiq Khan and LBC. Bus drivers are just letting people on without masks, doing and saying nothing. It seems if you don't want to wear a mask, then you simply don't have to. Our bus passed a lot of enforcement officers who didn't do anything. There's quite a few coming in like this. And how do you check that someone is okay not to wear a mask? Who checks? So there's an operational problem with it, and that someone has just gone back from Amsterdam where absolutely everybody was wearing a mask on a bus. The situation in London is close to the polar opposite. I'm not getting, I don't know if I would get anybody getting in touch.
On the Amsterdam point, it's really important to say, on the Amsterdam point and our colleagues around the world, actually there's been face masks being worn there since March.
Yes.
But also it's not just on public transport. You'll be aware, James, the conversation we've had about the mixed messaging and the confused comms. It was only very recently where it was obligatory to wear a face covering just on public transport, and then it went to shops. And what's happened in Amsterdam, in Paris, in Berlin, in Seoul, in other parts of the world, to those of you who are tweeting James, is for a number of months now, in fact for 5 months, it's been the cultural norm to wear a face covering. So on public transport in those cities and countries, that is the cultural norm. In London, it's only on public transport where you're asked to do so. Until recently, it's now shops, and so that number's going to go higher, I hope. But listen, all of us have a responsibility to do the right thing. If we don't wear a face covering, we are more likely to give somebody the virus. And the important number for those of your listeners who are responsible to bear in mind is you've got a 70% chance of passing the virus if you've got it, if you don't wear a face mask. It's only 5% if you do. And that's why it's really important to do the responsible thing, because you may be asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, is wear a face mask.
I wondered yesterday whether the English government's reluctance to return the A-level grades to the ones predicted by or estimated by teachers might be that they don't want to appear to be in the wake of their political opponents. It would involve copying what Scotland had already done, and that would perhaps for Westminster, for the English government, that would be politically unhelpful. Do you think that your early call for face coverings on public transport and beyond might have played into the government's tardiness in calling for it as well, in that they didn't want to look as if they were following Sadiq Khan's lead?
That's a really fair question. So the conversations that I had with the government often are in private.
Yes.
I only go public if I'm banging my head against the wall, metaphorically speaking. And if that is the case, and the government is that churlish, then that begs far too many questions for us to deal with in this phone-in. But I hope not. I hope the government is more grown up than that, but who knows? And so often so today's a good example, James. After I leave this show, I'm going to Oxford Street to meet with traders there who are really struggling.
Yes.
And what I've been saying to the government privately now is, listen, these shops are going to go bust. We're already seeing redundancies being made. It's a perfect storm. People working from home, social distancing, lack of confidence, domestic tourism, international tourism dying. They need help, otherwise we'll have 50,000 jobs lost, we'll have a huge reduction in revenues being raised, and it's a big concern. And I've been raising these privately, no response from the government. So today I'm making a public call to the government to support these businesses by an extended business rates holiday, by doing much more to give them targeted assistance and so forth. And so I do try to raise things privately with the government, and if all else fails, I've got to raise it publicly. So Ari's question, the first caller today, Ari, the really worried student around A-levels, those conversations have been had privately, and they're now going to be made publicly because obviously the government's not listened so far.
Sheridan, our earlier caller, would like to draw your attention particularly to the 25, the 147 and the 38. It's all gone a bit North Norfolk digital on this one, and I'm also getting other bus routes sent in, which we shall furnish you. Please do.
It's a genuine ask, because it's really important that we know where the problems are, and we will target enforcement officers and BTP to those areas.
As you prepare to make your way up to Oxford Street, what is your message to companies? Because there's another area of division, isn't there? The government very keen for people to go back to the office. Employers simply not that keen, quite happy to continue having white-collar workers working from home. So that's having a huge economic impact on the shops that you'll be visiting later, because this building is relatively deserted, and it would ordinarily be full of people who go out every lunchtime to buy food and to buy frocks and to buy headphones and all manner of things. So where do you sit on that tension?
I think the key thing when you speak to people why they're not returning to work is because of lack of confidence. We did some polling. 2/3 of Londoners are worried they may catch the virus. 90% they may give somebody the virus. And so it's really important that people have confidence to return to work or go shopping or do the things they need to do. And so one of the things we're working with the government on, actually, a good example of us working with the government, is to get clarity in relation to the message. And the biggest issue, James, is not having a fully operational, effective test, trace, isolate system. You saw the independent analysis this week. 50% are not being contacted in relation to contact trace. In other countries who've been more effective have got a successful TTI. And I think if we had a more successful test, trace, isolate system, you'd have more people having the confidence to return to work. But also, if you're in a manual job, in a low-paid job, 0 hours contract, you can't afford to self-isolate for 14 days on a regular basis more than once. And that's a disincentive to take a risk. And so look,
the app is being launched again. I don't know if you're aware of this. They're having another trial on the Isle of Wight with another app. I think that, I forget the figure that I saw had been spent on the last one, which had failed. But I suppose we all have to cross our fingers they get it right this time. And I also see they're advertising for a pandemic preparedness advisor, which some might say was 6 months late, but some might say better late than never.
I mean, on the app, you're absolutely right. It's been a chaos and a fiasco. Another example of fiasco. The good news, by the way, is I was lobbying in April that if you're going to pilot this, don't just rely upon Isle of Wight, pilot it in a borough in London. And the good news is they're going to pilot it also in a borough in London, which is really important because it's real-time testing of the app in a diverse borough like the one they've chosen in London. That's good news.
And as if to underline the importance of that point, this is from Anna, who's in Streatham. I'm staying at home based on the absence of mask discipline on public transport. I'd be out meeting people and spending money if masks were being taken more seriously and enforced. You've only got to watch buses going past with passengers wearing masks on their chins or not at all. I've noticed the chin thing a bit. Which I presume is habit. That people haven't got used to.
Anna,
that's the problem. Get strict, and the economy will open up.
Anna, you're right. So, Anna, one of the things I've said to the Prime Minister in the letter I've written to him today is that we should explore other ways to build public confidence. And one of the things, Anna, you'd be interested to know that's happened in Paris is earlier on this week they've said whenever you're in a place where there's lots of members of public, even outdoors, wear a face mask. And not only does it minimise the chance of the virus spreading, but it leads to greater public confidence. And so what I'm saying to the government is let's work together to find ways of increasing public confidence. That could be more face mask wearing, more enforcement, an effective test, trace, isolate system, and so forth. But I think one of my frustrations is that because of various examples of the government making mistakes, the public's ability to have confidence in the government is diminishing. And so it's really important that we actually try and, give information based on evidence. And so making threats doesn't work. We've got to make sure that you're confident and feel safe leaving your home. Because if we don't, you're going to stay at home.
I would add, again, the few messages that I would expect to get at this time, talking about muzzles and even face nappies, which is a new one on me. People who, I don't know why, but they're persuaded that masks are some sort of conspiracy or that they involve some sort of surrender of human rights. They're quite noisy and they get some coverage.
Well, can I
Can't
say,
be helpful.
Well, one of the joys about living in a democracy is, yes, we have human rights, but human rights comes with both rights and responsibilities. So, yes, it is my human right, if I chose to do so, not to wear a seatbelt in a car. But if I'm in the back seat, I risk killing the person in front of me in the driver's seat, but also myself. It's my human right to smoke in a public space, but if I do so, I can give somebody else cancer and so forth. So one of the great things about human rights is it gives both rights but also responsibilities. And I think one of the responsibilities we have is not to give somebody else the virus that we may have and we not know that we've got it because it's asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. And there's nothing unusual about that living in a civilized democracy. So all I'd say to colleagues is this is a proportionate response to a deadly virus, and wearing a face mask is one of the most unselfish things we can do and the easiest things we can do to stop the virus spreading as fast as it has in the past.
10:38 is the time. Mark is in East Ham. Mark, you're through to the Mayor.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning.
Hello, mate.
Hi, Mark.
Right, the guy that was just on Sheridan, he's on the money there, because from East Ham Town Hall to the bowling pub next to the old West Ham football ground, 6 bus stops. I go past them every morning, 7 o'clock. The bus stops are rammed, no one is in a mask. So I don't know where you're getting your figures from, mate, but they're not right. But I just had to throw that in.
No, I'm glad
thanks,
you did,
Mark,
but
and I'm grateful.
you're not required to wear one at the bus stop, are you? You're required to put one on when you get on the bus. But let's crack on with the question you rang in with.
Right, OK, right. I've just been reading your budget forecast for 2020-2021. 193 million tube journeys. Now, that's not going to happen now, and you've said you're going to run out of money again in October. So how much debt are you going to rack up before you start laying up trains to cut down service costs and maintenance charges and make people redundant? How much money are you going to get into? How much debt are you going to incur before you start having to lay people off?
What do the numbers look like in your own forecast?
Mark, firstly, thank you for reading the budget forecast for next year. So we estimate we'll lose £4 billion this year, Mark, because of COVID on public transport. And the reason for that is because more than 90% of our fares will be reduced because of the fewer people using public transport. The worst part of lockdown, it was 5% on the tubes and 10% on buses. Now it's about 25% on tubes, or getting to almost 50% on buses. And so that's lots of revenues that we're not getting. And also don't forget, Mark, as you've read the budget forecast, you'll know this, 72% of our revenues comes from fares. When you add in congestion charge, advertising and property, it goes to 86%. So we're reliant upon those things rather than a government grant. And that's one of the reasons why I'm lobbying the government, because London is not unusual. Other transport authorities around the country, but also the MTA in New York, the Transport Authority in Paris, in Hong Kong and others have got government assistance. And what I'm saying to the government, Mark, is we want to avoid cancelling buses, stopping tubes and trains. That's why it's important you give us this financial assistance, which is what will be needed if we're going to have a decent recovery.
How much do you need? They're not going to give you £4 billion, are they?
We think for an entire year we'll need £3.2 billion.
And what's the figure at which you shut the tube?
If we haven't got 2 months' worth of reserves, so we need £1.2 billion of reserves to provide services for 2 months. And so on October the 17th is when the monies we've got runs out, say, for the 2 months cash reserves, £1.2 billion. And so we're talking to the government between now and October the 17th. I'm hoping it doesn't go to the last day. If you remember, we were speaking on the last day last time before the government did a deal with lots of strings and conditions attached. And I'm hoping...
This is an interesting thing, because I've seen Sean Bailey, the Conservative candidate for the mayoral election next year, make capital out of this as well. That there's still a bit of confusion out there on whether or not you elected independently to increase the congestion charge and fares and remove free travel for some cohorts. That's the word of the day, I think, isn't it? Or whether or not you were essentially ordered to do that by the government in order to secure the funding. Can we clear that up for once and for all?
Sure. I've tried to clear this up, and I know that the current Conservative candidate is misleading the public. But the position is this.
Well, I'm sure he'd disagree with that, and he's welcome to...
Well, let's go to what an independent body says. I mean, I think Full Fact UK checked this assertion made by the current Tory candidate. And what they said was, actually, I was required, I'm paraphrasing, but I was required to do so by the government. And I've published the letter from the Secretary of State where he lays down a number of conditions. One is to reintroduce the congestion charge straight away. Two is to widen and level the scope of the congestion charge. That means 7 days a week, longer hours, and it going up. 3, to remove free travel for under 18s. Big source of concern.
I'm getting a lot of messages about
big
that.
Lot.
Today.
I mean, listen, there are about 600,000 Londoners who take advantage of this.
Yes.
60% are black, Asian, minority, ethnic. There are disabled children. In London, often you don't go to the school nearest to your home. You're changing buses 2-3 times. You've chosen the school to go to or the further education college you go to because you've got free travel. And lo and behold, the government's moving the goalposts. And the other 2 requirements were, one is to increase fares in January, and lastly, to remove from over 60s the benefit of using their Freedom Pass before 9 o'clock. And those were the strings attached, which were in the letter from SHAPS to me, which I've published and which has been checked by this independent body.
Funny question to end with. Funny peculiar, not funny ha-ha. If I was the CEO of a big London business, if I was in charge of Google perhaps or something like that, and I had thousands of office staff currently working from home, and I just said, you can decide whether or not I order them to come back to work next week or not. You make the decision, Mr. Mayor. What would you say to me?
Firstly, Google have told their staff they can stay working from home until next April.
I know they have. So it's a theoretical question.
Yeah, sure. What I'd say to Google and other big employers is, look, we're doing what we can to make sure London is as safe as it can be. You've seen at TfL the enhanced cleaning regime we're doing. You've seen the testing we're doing. You've seen the hardware we're doing to make TfL safe and provide record numbers of buses and tubes and other things in the context of a pandemic. Many small businesses rely upon your workers returning to work. The cafe bars, the dry cleaners, the shoe repair shops, and others. And actually, when I meet not just those in the cultural industry, those in hospitality, small businesses, they're struggling. And so, of course, there's a choice for you to make as a big employer.
No, but I've just asked you to make the choice.
I love London because of its ecosystem. I don't want a hollowed out London. I don't want a polo recovery.
So if I gave you the power to press the button on my business, you would press it?
Well, let me give you the example by saying what I'm doing in City Hall.
Yes. Okay.
In City Hall, we've made sure we've got everything ready. We've used July and August to make City Hall safe with social distancing, with signs, one-way systems, lift systems working. And we normally have about 750 staff in there. Staff have been invited to come back. We think 200 are going to come back by the end of in the next couple of weeks. And when schools return in September, I'd expect to see a larger number returning. Some people will want to spend 1 or 2 days working from home, and they can be as productive, and I understand that. Others will want to return home, particularly if you're living in a shared home. If you're somebody who, in your bedroom is your office, and there's an ironing board there, and your TV's there, you're really struggling. And so I think you'll have a mixed message, but the key thing is, I think we need to understand that if we all stay at home working, it's a big problem for Central London.
Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, many thanks indeed. As usual, I've hung on to you for a little longer than was previously agreed, for which we're grateful. The time now is 10:45.
Eddie Mayor, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
In April 1993, Stephen Lawrence, a black teenager, was murdered in a racially motivated attack. The Metropolitan Police said it would no longer investigate the crime unless new information appeared. Stephen Lawrence's father, Neville, so what do you think of the Met's decision?
I don't agree with the Met decision, but I'm all left to force them to continue, because if I had listened to them in the early days, we would